Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 71. Today, Sheri and I are still in Rome, and we'll be in Rome for quite a while. And today we're going to take a walk to the Palatine Hill and see where the Imperial Palaces were located at one time. And of course, one of the issues that you have is there's quite a bit of destruction, and it's sometimes hard to see what is actually there. So I've supplied some interesting pictures to kind of compensate for that. Not a lot of people come up here to view this. You're really missing something because there are two overall views that you get from up here on Palatine Hill if you get nothing else. One is an overview of the great Circus Maximus. The other is an overview of the entire Roman Forum. So it's well worth coming up here. But I would point out that Sheri and I came up here to the Palatine Hill at the first part of the day. Then we went down and then went through the Forum that we'd just seen from up above. And then we completed our day by visiting the Colosseum. Now I've already done a show on the Colosseum, and that is show number 45. So you can check that out if you want to. So let's head up and start walking the Palatine Hill using our trusty tourist map. Here's where we're going today. Now we're actually going to go through this whole area as I mentioned before, but this show is about the Palatine Hill. So we'll enter right down here and then walk around the entire site and a nice view over the Forum. To give you a background of this whole area, people talk about the 7 hills of Rome. Well, here they are: Aventine, Palatine, Capitoline, Quinrail, Viminal, Esquiline, and Caelan. Those are the high points. And you can see where we've been. We've been to the Field of Mars, which is kind of a flat area, which is the floodplain for the Tiber River. So the early people in the Roman area will come and inhabit this. And when we get to the museum that's up on the Palatine Hill, they have a really great visual showing the change in who lived here. So let's talk about the ancient part of this. Now, the ancient road of Cluvius Platinus, which led from the Arch of Titus to the Palatine, the little hill here, has always enjoyed a special status from the beginning of Roman history. First of all, you notice it's the central position amongst the 7 hills. According to legend, Greeks from Arcadia settled here in the early days, led by Evander and his son Pallas. Romulus, wrote the poet Virgil, met them when he too settled on the Palatine and founded the city of Rome. Here the legend and history are in agreement. The remains of an Iron Age house on the southwestern side of this hill confirms the tradition of the Casa Romuli, which was believed to be the home of the city's founder, and was then rebuilt again and again. There's also a sacred cave below the Palatine, which was venerated as the Lupercal, the place where Romulus and Remus were said to have been suckled by a she-wolf. And other deities in their cults are then also associated with this site, such as the Sibyl, the predicting goddess of Asia Minor, Vesta, the Greek god of Apollo. And it will start out before it's a major power, it'll have regular wealthy people living there. Now in this reconstruction, you can see the Palatine Hill, which is located over in this area right here. Now you notice that there's a very large, high section, and this of course is the Capitoline Hill. It's the highest spot in the area, which is why the Temple of Juno was built on that site. Now the schematics of what was there based on the ruins that we have. So this is the ruins chart, and it shows all of these different buildings. Frequently you go, well, Augustus lived here. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. So during this Republican period, the hill became the favorite residence first of the upper classes, and there are some remaining little parts of those that are left. Now the Emperor Augustus brought radical changes to the appearance and the importance of the Palatine, because he built a temple that linked his own house to his patron god of Apollo. Subsequently, the Palatine became the imperial residence in succession. It saw the buildings of the palaces of Tiberius, Nero, the Flavians, and Septimus Severus, and they managed to merge into a gigantic complex of buildings that looked like a single imperial palace. As a matter of fact, the word palace itself is derived from the name Palatine. And even today, the ruins, as you can see here, convey a vivid impression of the former magnificence of this particular complex. But it does make it difficult when you come up here if you know nothing about it. Sheri and I knew a lot about it, and we wandered. We were so struck by what we saw, we ended up wandering around a little bit. And when I put this show together, I had to forget about retracing our steps because they kind of meandered around a while till we figured out what was going on. Here's a nice simulation because these buildings have height to them. 2, 3, 4 stories. Look at the Domus Severa from down here, and there's a Circus Maximus. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 stories. The Stadium of Demetion. The Domus, the home of Augustus, this section. The Flavians built right next door. There's the Temple of Apollo. There's another, the original house of Augustus, and then Tiberius built down the side of the hill. And you can see the aqueduct bringing water in. Now, again, to go and use the chart, here you have the Domus Augustana, all the stuff associated with him. There's the where Tiberius had his section up on top. Remember, his does actually go down. There's the Flavian house. And eventually, Domitian, there's the Severans over here. And Domitian then adds a lot of material here. Now, if we go to the air and we get an aerial view, there's the good old Colosseum. There's the apartment building that we're staying in. So we walked down to the Arch of Titus and then took a left and headed up into this green space. But from here you can see there's the Vatican, the tomb of Victor Emmanuel, of course the Capitoline buildings, which would have been the Temple of Jupiter at one time. And then going directly over the site. Now from the air it looks like, wow, there's all these different buildings, but from the ground it's hard to make out what is actually here in some places except for the stadium area. There's the museum of the Palatine, which we'll go in and look at a few different things. There's some of the gardens over here. And of course, all of these buildings along the side here, they look out on the Circus Maximus. When I teach my classes and I talk about ancient Rome, they're always amazed that the Imperial Palace is right next to the Circus Maximus, where they have chariot racing practically every day out of the year. And the noise from this would just have to be deafening at some times. But they have apartments along here where their guests and other people could stay and sleep and then sit out and watch the races. So that's a kind of an overview, and now we're going to get down to the ground level to see how complicated this can get. Well, here we are lining up to get into the venue. We had what is known as the Roma Pass, which allowed you to go in a certain number of places for free. So we will get to go to the Palatine Hill and the Forum for free. We will also be able to go freely into the Colosseum. We have to pay for the guided tour and skip the line as well. So we pay our money and then we walk towards the Arch of Titus and then we'll take a left. But here are some pictures of this side of Palatine Hill. Of course, obviously it had buildings in ancient times, so we have ruins. So this is a set of the buildings that's directly behind where you buy your ticket. And then as we come in, you can see one length of the Forum. And there's the Capitoline Hill up here with some of the later buildings. And somewhere back in here is the so-called Cave of Lucercal. And then this is a picture, again, of the side facing the Forum. This is the area where the garden is located. And this is the vantage point, which lets you view the entire Forum. Now, if you go to the Capitoline Hill and you go to the Capitoline Hill museums, they have two museums and they interconnect, and where they connect is the old Temple of Jupiter, and they have an open porch. So here is Sheri standing on the open porch looking out. Again, the green space up here is the Palatine Hill, and the ruins directly behind her head are part of Tiberius's home that started at the top and then worked its way down. Well, here we are beginning our walk. So you see the nice gated area giving you directions. So we start heading up, looking off to the side, the walls there of the Palatine Hill. And it's not a steep walk. You get a little exercise out of doing that. And we come up to this building that is part of the Domus Flavia that some of the Flavian emperors used. So here's another section of the building. There's a kind of a frontal view, and you can see the trees and all of the other gardens that are around it as well. So it's pretty nice. They do have a small selection of plaques to give you a brief explanation as to what you're seeing. You can find some of the underground rooms that have the original paint still on the wall. You really need a guide for that. You can find it just wandering around, but you really need a guide for that. Now we're entering the front of the Domus Augusta. And of course, it had fountains and all sorts of things. So here's some of the walls of the buildings. This is on the left, this is on the right, and then we come out into this open area, and I'm kind of panning from left to right. So over this direction, there is a amphitheater that was enlarged by Demetion later on. And then we move over to this next picture, and you see this building, this ruin in the middle, and there's a little bit of a white building. That is part of the apartments where people stayed. That's one story. There were two others above, and there are three down below. And then there's a little further swing over, and you can see one of the walls on the side. And the white thing in the middle is actually the museum of the Palatine Hill. And then here is the museum of the Palatine Hill, and you go, wow, it doesn't seem to match anything. No, it was originally a religious building built in the 1800s, but I'll talk about that at another time. And then here I've turned around and I'm shooting back where we came from. So we came in, you had the walls on the one side and the walls on the other side, and then this open area. And you could see where there would have been fountains and all sorts of water features. As we drew closer to the museum, we saw several sections where you could see the marble tiles, floors, roads, whatever they're used for, but you'll find this marble all over the place. And then here we are, we're heading towards the museum. We're going to go to the left-hand side. Now we're just going to go by it. On the other side is the apartment complexes that overlook the Circus Maximus. So here we are heading off to the left-hand side of the museum, seeing these entryways. Here's one of the main gates leading to this whole apartment complex. And what we're heading towards is the Stadium of Demetion, or the Hippodomus, as they call it, because that's what they've used it for exercising horses and other things. But again, here's a view back to where we came, and you can see there's a little bridge here. There's some of the original buildings that we came by when we first started in. So now we're going to head into the Stadium of Demetion. Here we are at the Stadium of Demetion. Now this is 160 meters long, 48 meters wide. It actually became a Greek-style gymnasium. You have places where you exercise the horses. You could have gladiator contests here. They had music. They have all sorts of things that could go on. And then you had a building around it. So here's an example of the building that's right dead center in the middle of one of the sides. And then here you look down the whole length from one end to the other. And directly below where this picture was taken, you see this area, which would have been a stage. They also had water features in here as well. And then here looking over to the other side, there's the wall. And then behind this wall over here where the trees are is a water area, bathing area, and it's also called the Nymphium. Now we're going to head back to the Domus Augustus and look at the rooms that overlook the Porticoed Courtyards. And some of these are 10 meters below ground level. They're private apartments, and even today they're still accessible by ancient staircases. And each room opened onto a semicircular courtyard with fountains and all sorts of different things. And then some of them then faced out onto the Circus Maximus. So here's one of the areas. You can see the buildings around, and there's the central courtyard, which of course is fountained. We'd have water in there, flowers as well, close-up view of the fountain region. And then here we are panning back to see the walls around it. And of course the walls extended up in ancient times. So we're moving closer to the Circus Maximus. So here we walk by the giant entrance gate that we saw when we were on the outside, looking back the other direction. And then we come to some more of these courtyards. Again, fountains, water sources, all sorts of things. Here we are backing away, and you can see the first story, second stories, these buildings up in here. Here's a view of the apartments. And then this is looking down through one of them, and you can see the bottom structure and then the other rooms. So this is just incredible. You can imagine what it looked like with the stucco, with the frescoes on the walls and all sorts of mosaics and the servants and the people. It's been spectacular. Now we turn away from looking at the apartments to looking out as if you were in an apartment from the top area. One of the things that you can see from up here, there's part of what's left of the Temple of Apollo, but you can see the Dome of St. Peter's in the background. And then you look down below, and what you see is the Circus Maximus. Now, this is as it appears obviously today. This is the starting area down in this region. So there are 12 gates, and they were in the process of rebuilding them when we were there. Circus Maximus was built out of wood on a couple of occasions, and then the people would get mad and burn it down. So Caesar had it built out of stone, and then Trajan expanded it. So under Trajan, this was 650 meters or 2,132 feet long. 125 meters wide, 410 feet. And this place could have held up to 250,000 people, which is why I always say, why in the world does the emperor have his palace up here? Because the noise has got to be unbelievable. At the time of Augustus, you see the white line running down? That's where the spinae, or the spine, was located. Now, at Augustus's time, that was 2 meters high, or 7 feet, and it was 6 meters, or 20 feet wide, and that separates the two sides. And in the race, you had to complete 7 laps. So that's quite a long race. Here we are looking down pretty much at the center of the arena. Sheri and I came here to do the Circus Maximus separately. So here's pictures showing what it looked like from the other side of this seating area, which of course would have extended higher, but this is the walls that are left. So here's a view from across that venue looking at the palace. So you can see these apartments along in here where they would have looked out over the area. Great way to have some lunch, watch the races. Then here's another section. This is not too far from where the Stadium of Demetion is located. The back end of it could also overlook that. And then again we continue with our walk down that direction, and ultimately we get to the end. So here they would have turned and then gone back the other direction. Here's a picture, and you can see this building here. This is the entrance that allowed the emperor to come down to his box right at the side of the Circus Maximus. And frequently, if he's in attendance, he's going to be the starter, which means he is in charge of what's known as the Albilinea. It's a white rope. It stretches across this part of the race course. So they start way down at the other end. They're coming towards this entry zone. And the width of each side is each straightaway is only wide enough for 6 chariots if you're riding 4-horse chariots. So there's always a crash or something in the very first one. But the idea is that if you didn't think there was a good, fair start, you just leave the rope up and trip the horses and they have to start over. So you're trying to figure out what's going to happen because that rope is dropped at the very last minute. So you really needed to know who the emperor was betting on. If it was Nero, that's easy. He loved the greens. He actually had the sand dyed in the Circus Maximus green one time in their honor. Now we're going to head to the Museum of the Palatine. Now that white building used to be a convent. It was built in the 19th century on part of the grounds on which the Palazzo de Favia was situated. The Museum of the Palatine occupies the building today, and there are many murals, sculptures, and other archaeological finds from the area that are on display. And one of the things that I really like is their models of the inhabitation of the Palatine. So here is the Neolithic view of the area where you would have the people on the different hills in the region. And then here is a model of what the early buildings would have looked like in the region. Actually not too dissimilar from those that you would find in early Etruscan territory to the north. And then here's some of the pottery from that particular time period as well. Here is an artistic view of what that would have looked like with the Palatine Hill and the various settlements on it. Then when we get to the Republic, the people who are living up here as senators and rich businessmen, this is what it looked like. You still see the Circus Maximus down here. Obviously, this isn't the main palace. That's going to be all removed later on. Now, if you went into some of those buildings, you would have found this. You'll see this if you go to Pompeii as well. These stuccoed walls with painting and frescoes. And then here is the artist's rendition of what the Palatine Hill looked like during the time of the emperors. So you see the theaters that looked out onto the site. You see Domitian's stadium over here, the Temple of Apollo, and all of the other buildings in this region. They also had a sample based on their archaeological work. These are samples of different types of marble, different colors of marble that were used on the Palatine Hill. Now, the Art Museum has quite a bit of interesting items. One of the nice collections are the 4 Hermes statues that you see here. And then here is a bust of Asclepius. And then you view down the hall and they have statues and other stonework. You come to one section and here are these carved wings, which makes a great picture. And I'm sure Sheri and I took a picture of us, each of us, doing this, but I couldn't find them. So just assume that we, the tourists, put wings on. There's another view of another section of the building. And then you come to the busts. But here we have, this first one is a bust of Nero. And then we have good old Trajan. And then next to Trajan, we have the daughter of Marcus Aurelius. And then here's Antoninus Pius, one of the 5 good emperors. And then we have Faustina, which is the young wife of Marcus Aurelius. And then we have, lastly, Julia Domna, who was Septimus Severus' wife. Interesting hairstyles. Well, once we were finished in the museum, now we're going to go out into the garden. Now we're going to be walking through what is known as the Varanasi Gardens, but it would have been part of Flavian palaces, as well as parts of Tiberius's original palace. Of course, my wife, Sheri, is a big gardener, so we've got to see the gardens. So here we are walking by the walls of the various buildings and coming down the walkway, but then there's a nice little pond, fountain area from the back of these 2 buildings. Up here, we continue walking towards the rose garden. Beautiful little rose garden with a little fountain feature. And we get a little closer. There's our fountain feature, probably still running off of the original spring from the region, which is very common. And then when we walked by there to the next section, we came up to this little monument. The little monument you see here is actually the burial of the ashes of Giacomo Boni, who was born in 1859 and died in 1925. He is the archaeologist who specialized in the Roman Forum and is responsible for its excavation and reconstruction, and he also worked on the Doge's palace as well. So he was given the honor of being buried amidst his creation. So it's very nice. Saying goodbye to Giacomo Boni, we headed to the edge of the Varanasi Garden, which is still part of probably the old palace of Tiberius, for the view. Now here is a picture from down in the forum area of where we are located for these pictures, right here on this corner area. So looking back, there is the good old Colosseum. And then the next one is there's the Colosseum, and then you begin coming up the area here, which is the forum. And then across the way is one of the basilicas and the area of the tomb of Romulus. And then here's another little closer shot of the tomb of Romulus, which is also a church now. And this is part of one of the Vestal Virgin temples. Then we move a little bit further. This area in here is where Julius Caesar was cremated. And then our last shot, looking all the way down towards the Capitoline Hill, where you have the 2 museums on either side, and then that is where the Temple of Jupiter, or Juno, was located. And these 3 openings down here are the openings that are from the actual temple that look out onto the forum. And then here is the Senate building over here, which unfortunately was under reconstruction at the time. So we didn't get a chance to go in there. And then, of course, you can see in the background something that wasn't there in ancient times. That is the tomb of King Victor Emmanuel. So you can see it is worth going up to the Palatine Hill just for the view of the Circus Maximus and the Forum. And actually coming up and seeing the forum from above made it a lot easier to view as to where you were and what you were planning on seeing when you're actually walking into it. Well, it's time to exit the Palatine Hill, but there's still a couple of things to see. On the way down, we found several of these ancient water features. Here's one with Sheri next to it. And then we walked by that building that had a fountain in it as well. And then here's another section where the water is coming out of that building and forming this pool. And then we walked back down to where we started. And there's the Arch of Titus. And now we're going to begin our walk through the Roman Forum. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett. And please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.